Picture this. Miami, January 19th, 1977. People on Biscayne Boulevard were expecting a standard humid Wednesday. Instead, they walked out into air that smelled like ozone and old pennies. While wearing windbreakers meant for the heat, they watched something impossible drift down under the streetlights. It landed on the hood of a yellow Oldsmobile, and it didn't splash. It sat there. This is the story of the day the weather maps broke, the day it actually snowed in Miami. According to science, this wasn't supposed to happen. In the meteorological history of the region, this was a statistical impossibility, a glitch in the matrix of the Sunshine State. But for the millions of people waking up that Wednesday morning, it wasn't a weather anomaly or a quirky footnote in a history book. It was a sudden, jarring intrusion of the impossible into their daily reality. The tropical paradise that sold itself on eternal summer had just frozen over. To understand the sheer magnitude of this moment, you have to remember the mood of 1977. The country was tired. We were nursing a hangover from Vietnam and Watergate. The energy crisis was making everyone stare anxiously at gas pumps, where fuel was hovering around 62 cents a gallon. We wanted escapism. We wanted Star Wars, which was just months away, and disco. Miami was the capital of that escapism, a pastel-colored refuge where winter was just a rumor reported on the nightly news by Walter Cronkite. But on this particular morning, a potent cold front, a runaway freight train of Arctic air, had barreled down the spine of the continent. It had ignored the usual stop signs of the Mason-Dixon line, punched through the deep south, and kept going. By the time it reached South Florida, it collided with the humid Atlantic air, and the alchemy of physics took over. As the city began to wake up, the confusion was palpable. Inside the ranch-style homes of Hialeah and Coral Gables, clock radios clicked on to the sound of DJs who sounded frantic, their voices cracking with a mix of hysteria and delight. They weren't playing the usual rotation of Eagles or Fleetwood Mac. They were shouting about the temperature. 30 degrees at Miami International Airport, 28 degrees in Homestead, and falling. The morning rush hour became a scene of beautiful, dangerous chaos. You have to realize that the average Floridian car in 1977, those land yacht station wagons and heavy Chevy Impalas, was not equipped for winter. Antifreeze was an afterthought. Defrosters were vestigial organs, rarely touched. As people drove onto I-95, they hit a phenomenon they had no muscle memory for: slush. Wipers smeared the white powder across windshields, creating a gray paste that obscured the view. Brake lights turned the highway into a river of red as drivers simply stopped. Not because the road was impassable, the accumulation was merely a dusting in most places, but because they were stunned. People pulled their cars onto the shoulder, threw the transmission into park, and got out. Imagine the soundscape. Usually a Miami highway is a roar of V8 engines and horns, but that morning, the roar dampened. Snow has an acoustic dampening effect, absorbing sound. The world felt quieter, muffled. Into that silence came the sounds of pure, unadulterated joy. Grown men in three-piece business suits stood by the guardrails, holding their hands out like children. Women in nurses' uniforms laughed as flakes landed on their eyelashes. It was a collective hallucination shared by an entire metropolis. In the suburbs, the routine of the school run fell apart. Kids who had only ever seen snow in Peanuts cartoons or on Christmas cards rushed out the door in pajamas, screaming. For a generation of Sunbelt children, snow was a mythical substance. They tried to catch it on their tongues, finding it tasted like cold dust. They scraped thin layers off the hoods of cars to make snowballs the size of golf balls, throwing them before they could melt into water in their warm hands. Teachers abandoned lesson plans. The classroom was outside today. Yet, amidst the wonder, the reality of the era's limitations was stark. There was no Gore-Tex, no high-tech fleece. People layered what they had. A visual survey of downtown Miami that morning would have shown a bizarre fashion montage. Bathrobes worn over denim, newspapers stuffed into shoes for insulation, and beach towels wrapped around heads like makeshift scarves. The 70s aesthetic, all open collars and synthetic fabrics, was defenseless against the chill. The palm trees, the iconic sentinels of the city, looked bewildered. Their green fronds were dusted with white, creating a visual oxymoron that photographers scrambled to capture. It looked like a postcard from a different planet. The visuals were so striking that they almost masked the underlying anxiety rippling through the older generation. For the retirees who had moved to Florida to escape the brutal winters of New York or Chicago, this was a betrayal. They sat on their porches, wrapped in blankets, watching the sky with suspicion. If the one place in America guaranteed to be warm could freeze, what was safe? By 9 a.m., the sun began to fight back. The impossible snow was fleeting. It wasn't a blizzard that would bury the city. It was a transient dusting, a cameo appearance by winter. But in those few hours, the social fabric of the city shifted. Strangers spoke to each other at bus stops, bonded by the sheer novelty of seeing their breath mist in the air. The cynicism of the late 70s melted away for a brief window, replaced by a childlike awe. However, as the sun climbed higher and the white flakes turned to clear water, the novelty began to wear off, and the economic terror set in. While the city folk were playing in the slush, a different drama was unfolding just a few miles south and west. The snow was pretty on a windshield, but it was a death sentence on a leaf. The farmers weren't looking at the sky with wonder, they were looking at it with dread. The temperature hadn't just brought snow, it brought a killing freeze. And as the morning light fully illuminated the landscape, the smell of ozone was replaced by the acrid, choking smoke of desperation. exploration. While the coast was having a party, the interior was fighting a war. Just a few miles inland from the pastel hotels and the boardwalks, the atmosphere shifted from wonder to industrial desperation. If you drove west towards the Redland district or north towards the citrus belt, the crisp scent of ozone vanished, replaced by a thick, oily smog that burned the back of your throat. This was the domain of the orange growers, the backbone of Florida's economy in the 1970s. For them, the snow wasn't a miracle. It was an invasion. An orange is a delicate thing. It is essentially a ball of water and sugar wrapped in a thin skin. When the temperature drops below 28 degrees for more than 4 hours, the water inside the fruit freezes. It expands, the cells burst, the fruit turns to mush, and the tree itself can die, taking 5 years of investment with it. That night and into the morning, the groves looked like scenes from a battlefield. Farmers were waging a desperate, smoky counteroffensive against the atmosphere. They lit smudge pots, crude diesel-burning heaters that looked like black iron pipes sticking out of the ground. When those weren't enough, they resorted to darker measures. They dragged old rubber tires into the rows between the trees, doused them in gasoline, and set them on fire. Picture the contrast. The pristine, impossible white snow, dusting the glossy green leaves, backlit by the hellish orange glow of burning tires. Thick plumes of black, acrid smoke drifted low over the land, creating a toxic blanket designed to trap whatever heat the earth had left. The soundscape here wasn't quiet. It was dominated by the helicopters. Wealthier growers hired pilots to fly low and dangerous over the groves, using the downdraft from the rotors to mix the warmer air aloft with the freezing air near the ground. It was a mechanical ballet of survival, flown by pilots running on adrenaline and thermos coffee. Despite the fire and the fury, nature won. The cold was too deep, the wind too penetrating. Millions of dollars of fruit were destroyed in hours. If you walked through a grove the next day, you could hear the sound of the fruit dropping, a sad rhythmic thudding against the frozen soil. The Sunshine State had failed its most famous product. Back in the city, as the novelty of the snowdrift faded, the reality of the infrastructure failure set in. You have to remember that Miami architecture is designed to breathe. It's built with jalousie windows, those glass slats that crank open to let the breeze through, and terrazzo floors designed to stay cool under bare feet. These homes were sieves for heat. They had no insulation, they had no furnaces. As the sun went down on the 19th and the temperatures stayed brutally low, the city went indoors and realized it was freezing. The chill seeped through the thin concrete block walls. The terrazzo floors became blocks of ice that radiated cold up through the soles of shoes. The hardware stores had sold out of portable electric heaters by 8 a.m. By noon, they were selling out of masking tape and plastic sheeting as people tried to seal their drafty windows. In a dangerous turn, families turned on their gas ovens and left the doors open, huddled in the kitchen for warmth, a practice that fire marshals screamed about on the radio, terrified of carbon monoxide poisoning. The power grid, usually strained by air conditioners in August, was now groaning under the load of millions of resistive heating coils glowing red hot. Then came the clothing crisis. This was the era of the leisure suit, the halter top, and the nylon windbreaker. A winter coat in Miami was usually just a heavy sweater. Department stores like Burdeen's and Sears were raided. People bought anything that covered skin. You saw teenagers walking down Flagler Street wearing 3 pairs of socks and oversized raincoats. The sartorial elegance of the disco era collapsed into a hodgepodge of survival layering. The next morning, January 20th, the event was immortalized in black and white ink. The Miami Herald hit the driveways with a headline so large, so declarative, that it is still framed on walls in dive bars and living rooms across South Florida today. It didn't need a subheader. It just said, "The day it snowed in Miami." That newspaper became an instant artifact. People bought stacks of them. It was proof. In a pre-digital age where you couldn't just upload a video to the cloud, that physical paper was the validation that the world had indeed gone crazy. The tone of the reporting was a mix of awe and apocalypse. It detailed the car accidents, the frozen iguanas falling out of trees, a phenomenon that still happens but was terrifyingly novel then, and the complete destruction of the winter vegetable crop. The impossible snow of 1977 marked a psychological turning point. It broke the illusion of the tropics. It reminded a generation that the climate was not a static backdrop, but a volatile beast. The prices at the grocery store changed immediately. Orange juice became a luxury item for months, the price spiking as the supply chain dried up. The Florida gold had turned to ice. As the slush melted into dirty water in the gutters and the soot from the smudge pots washed off the palm fronds, the city returned to its rhythm. The heat came back. The humidity returned. But the memory stuck. It became a demarcation line in local history. There was life before the snow and life after. It was the day the impossible happened, and for a few hours, the laws of geography were suspended, leaving behind a story that would be told on humid porches for decades to come, usually starting with, "I remember where I was when the flakes started falling." We look back at the blizzard of 77 through a lens of sepia-toned curiosity, smiling at the images of Cadillacs dusted in white powder, but it serves as a stark reminder of our fragility. In an era before instant global weather apps, nature still had the power to truly ambush us. We have gained the technology to predict these anomalies, to wrap our crops in science and our homes in better insulation, but we have lost that collective collective, unified moment of wonder. That morning, millions of people stopped their individual hustles to look up at the same sky, sharing a singular, uncurated experience of disbelief. It was a time when the weather could still stop the world, and for a brief moment, we were all just cold, confused, and amazed together.